welcome to this week's piece. Or pieces, because this is a set of nightstands. They're in excellent condition. They're solid oak, lovely as far as build quality goes. It's just, this style is so boring to me. It's like that, the vintage 80. It's fine. Like I said, they're in good condition, but I've just been kind of putting them off because I didn't really know what I wanted to do with them. But then I had an idea and came back from Portland with my wallpaper. And you guys know how I feel about my wallpaper. It's good stuff. All right, so I'm giving these a quick clean as I do with every piece, even if I don't show it because cleaning's boring. But whenever I have like a random bottle like this, it's typically filled with vinegar, water, and some Dawn dish soap. It's really good at cutting grease and getting stuff off. So that's usually what I'm using if you find it like I'm holding a strange looking bottle. Then I'm going to sand the tops and the lower section of the bottoms because I want to do the bleached wood look. I just think oak looks a lot better in a lighter form. I suppose unless you're going to go super, super dark. It just has a very aggressive grain, which is beautiful. I love it. It's just very strong. Like I really love the side of that one. I know it's crazy, but I think it's really cool looking. So anyways, I'm going to do the bleached wood look, and I find that it softens it out enough to where it's just really, really enjoyable to look at. For this case in particular, I almost always mix up my washes based on the kind of wood that I'm using. So if I have a wood that turns pink or orange or yellow or something like that over the time, I will mix in a color in with the white to kind of counteract whatever color that is. So it's good to know color theory and what your wood species do over time, because then you can combat that in your washes if this is the route you go to create that lightened look. So you'll see me do washes a bunch of different ways. Sometimes it depends on how I feel. Sometimes it depends on the wood. Sometimes, there's so many variables, but there's usually a method to my madness, and sometimes there's not. So in this case, because I'm mixing up two different colors, I'm just adding water into the thickness I desire. It's literally whatever thickness I want and then the shade that I want. That's what I do. There's no measuring, there's no anything. It's just kind of how I want to deal with things. So that's where I'm at with this. Now I'm going to spray the entire surface of my piece. This just helps the wash to go on a little more evenly because the wood has already absorbed a liquid. So it lets the wash sit on top and is kind of going down through the wood the same way all over the place because the water has already been on the wood. I'm using just a very large brush to get this on. If you prefer, you can strictly do this with a rag. You can dip the rag inside the cup and put it on that way. Once my rag gets fairly heavy with the wash after wiping it back, you'll see me use that to apply wash. So whatever works for you, that's the way that you should go about doing this. So as you can see, I got it all on, have it fully saturated, and then I'll just take a cloth and wipe back the excess. You can see streakiness. That's fine. You just keep going, fold the towel over to a drier spot and keep going. You want to go in the direction of the grain, and then you'll see those lines kind of smooth out. And then since there's still some paint on the cloth because you've been wiping up all the excess, you can use some of that to kind of clean up and add a little more paint in certain spots to fill those out. So I hope you just saw that on that section there that was just, it didn't quite get enough, so I just used the cloth to fill out that section right there. And then I'm going to go through and do the same thing on the legs that I've sanded, and then I will do this 2 times. So once this fully dries, I will add one more wash, and the tops and legs will be complete. Now I know it seems strange to be taking off the hardware indoors right now, but it's because I wanted the tops to be on their way to drying because I'm going to seal up the tops with poly before I get painting on the rest of the piece. So I'm trying to get the tops and legs done as much as I can before moving on to other steps, because if I've sealed up the tops with poly and everything first, that way if I get any paint on them, I can just wipe it back. And since they're so light, I don't want to have to worry about that. Now for the door fronts, as I said, I got my wallpaper from Portland. Brought it here. You guys know this is like my all-time favorite, my little old lady floral. It's fine. You guys can judge me all you want. I don't care. I still like it. I'm using it. So for this, I'm just applying it with poly, which is what I typically do. This is pre-pasted wallpaper, so if you wanted to just wet it and put it on, I'm sure that would work fine. I always use poly because I feel like it activates the glue and also is kind of its own glue itself. So it's like a double adhesion in my mind. And I've never had any issues with this. So I really like making sure I have both of those steps. Now, as you can see, I'm dipping my brush in and using the corners to make sure I really get enough poly up in the corners and around the edges, because I do not want the wallpaper to lift in any of those areas. And corners and things are the areas that are going to want to lift the most. Mind you, this is a recessed section, so that actually helps a lot. And it's probably not super important to do it, but I am mostly paranoid, so I always make sure that my edges have extra poly on them and get it done that way. These I've already pre-cut several pieces to the size of the doors. I double check them, and then I'm just going to add a little bit of poly, what was left on the brush, to the back of the paper. And that kind of helps activate it and loosen up the paper because it has that bend in it. And so it makes it want to curl up while I'm laying it down. So if I get it just a little bit wet, you could even use a spray bottle for this part. Like I said, I just used what was left on my brush. But if you wanted to mist it with the spray bottle, that works awesome too. And then I just lay it in, press it out, and smooth out all the bubbles. Now you might find that there's still a little bit of bubbling. If it's a small amount, a lot of times as the paper dries, the bubbles will disappear. So that's kind of cool. You do not want wrinkling in wallpaper because that will not come out. But little bitty bubbles are fine. And then I'm using this is just a damp towel, and I'm using that to kind of push everything. It cleans up around the edges as I get squeeze out, and then also helps glide along the wallpaper to push out any bubbles and everything. If you want to use a brayer, that's fine. I like using the cloth because, like I said, it does the same thing, but then also cleans up the excess around the edges at the same time. I don't need to seal this. Typically, you see me seal over the top of my decoupage with more poly, but since this is a wipeable, cleanable wallpaper, I'm not worried about that, and I don't have to do it. Now for the body of the piece, again, this is after I have sealed the top and the legs with poly. I know I didn't show that part, but let's be real, it's boring. So top and legs have been fully sealed, and then I'm going in with Seal Gray. This is just a lovely mid-tone, very neutral gray. I'm being very meticulous along the leg section here because you guys know I don't like taping. So I freehand most any straight line that I have to do, unless I'm doing stripes or something like that where I'm incapable. But for this part, I'm, like I said, just being very careful with my brush and smoothing it on. And then I'm going to paint that on halfway up the piece. And with this oak like this, you want to make sure that you're really getting it down in the grain. So you'll see me do the brush both horizontal and vertical because I want to make sure that all the paint is getting in the grain. And I love that I can still see the grain through the paint. Not the color of the grain, but because it's so deep, you can see just the pattern of it, and I think it's lovely. So again, I'm using one brush to brush on half the gray up the top, and then I will come in with Blue Lagoon, which is a very blue toned gray. It's probably more blue than gray, but it has like, it's friendly with the gray. So that's where we're going. Putting that on the top, doing my straight line up underneath, and then I will then meet them in the middle. And sometimes you'll watch me blend my paints with the same brushes, and sometimes you'll watch me do it with a different cleaned brush. It a lot of times depends on how I feel for the day. So this day I felt like using my large blending brush. This thing makes quick work of blending, and it's lovely. And since I was doing this same blend around both pieces and all the doors separately, I did want to have that clean blending brush, so that's why I opted to do it this way today. So I'm just blending it out, doing swirls, and then I'll go back and forth, and then more at the top, then more at the bottom. And then off to the side, I actually have a damp rag that I use to clean off the brush to keep it clean so it doesn't muddy up the other colors. Because this is one of the cases where it's not one of my stormy blends, and I need to make sure that the top stays crisp and the bottom stays crisp in their own colors. So I will just go back and continue to work this until I'm happy. If I need to add more color on the top, I can go in with my blue Lagoon and add more at the top and then help that blend into the bottom, and same with the gray. Just whatever I need to do to make it happen. And then of course, you know, Mr. Bottle, that thing always helps. Now for the doors, it's the exact same thing. What I did here is I couldn't decide on a color, so all my doors were painted differently. I had a different plan entirely for this piece. But I held up the doors to figure out if the blend would be halfway through the doors, which they were, thankfully. So that way I knew that instead of having them attached to the piece, I could do the blend off separately, and then when I put them on, they matched up beautifully. I do use a small detail brush around the inside edges to make sure that that gets painted as well. And then of course, everything gets sealed up with the poly. I actually opted to keep the hardware the same. I didn't change it. I felt like it was neutral enough that I didn't have to do anything. I didn't want to use, I thought about doing a bright gold, but I just felt like these were kind of a softer situation and I didn't think that it would actually go good. So I left them and I'm pretty glad that I did. Oh hi, Taryn here with Elegant Upgrades, and we've got our finished pieces! Well, they turned out much better than I thought. I kind of just been letting these guys sit because it's just not my favorite style to work on. And so while I was up in Portland on my last trip, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna bring back some of my wallpaper because, you know, it's hard to have shops in two places and you got some stuff at one and not in the other and yada yada. So anyways, I brought, you guys know this is like my favorite wallpaper of all time. Love it. And I feel like it just makes everything better. So, including these, old like 80s style oak nightstands. And then of course we did the lighter look on top and on the legs, which I love. And I honestly could not decide on a color for the life of me. I literally painted every single door a different shade and was going around my parents' house and like, which one do you guys prefer? And it was a split decision. So I'm like, okay, because in my head, I wanted these very simple because I had the floral in the front and I wanted, you know, kind of the wood grain on top to stand out because it was just light and lovely. And I couldn't decide. And so it got 2 colors because, guys, I think I'm just not cut out for single colors anymore. I try and it doesn't make me happy. So it's a blend and it's a very simple, I mean, it's hardly a blend. You can see that it's the darker gray and then like the very cool blue, softer gray on top. You can tell that it's there, but it's minimal. And I adore it. I think it looks lovely. I actually love these now, which I didn't think it was gonna be possible, but there we have it. I think they're super cute. I think they'll sell pretty quick. I'm gonna list these ones on Etsy because they are such a good quality piece. Like I said, they are oak. They're an older style, but I think they're updated pretty nicely. So yeah, I think they'll do well. Thank you guys so much for watching and following along and all the things that you guys do all the time. Truly, thank you so much. Seriously, I can't tell you how happy you guys make me. Just in the premieres that you guys do with me and hang out with me, everyone, I think it's marvelous. And then Fran sent me these huge long clamps. Thank you so much, Fran. That is incredible. I'm so thankful for them. You guys are just the best. I can't tell you. And I know I do this every time, but just know that it's absolutely true and I'm very thankful for you. Anyways, I digress. I will get some pictures for you and I will see you guys next week.